Did I ever tell you about that time old Bubba What's-His-Name and the other fellow went duck hunting? Sure enough, they were sitting in their little wooden skiff among the reeds waiting for some ducks to come by, and they got themselves a duck. Old Bubba What's-His-Name said, "Woohoo, we'll be eating tonight." And as soon as they got that duck, Bubba What's-His-Name turned to his dog, Fido, who was in the bottom of the skiff, and said, "Fido, go fetch. Go get that duck." And Fido, a bird dog, got out of the boat, but instead of swimming across the pond to get that duck, Fido walked on all fours right on top of the water over to the other side of the pond, and Fido, being a good birder, picked up that duck very gently in his mouth, did not want to harm the duck with a too strong of a bite, and he walked back across the pond with the duck in his mouth. And Fido crawled into the boat, and then he laid that duck ever so gently at the feet of his master, Bubba What's-His-Name. Well, this is all going on. The other fella's watching, and he's looking down at Fido, just shaking his head with disgust. And Bubba What's-His-Name says to the other fellow, "What's wrong? Why are you shaking your head with disgust at my dog?" And the other fellow looks at Fido and said, "Well, what a lousy dog." Bubba What's-His-Name said, "What do you mean?" The other fellow says, "He can't even swim." Sometimes I wonder if we miss the miracles that are happening right under our very noses because we're looking through the lenses of this world rather than the lenses of our faith. Sometimes I think we look at this world through cloud-covered lenses or cloud-covered vision, and we're unable to see the miracles of God at work in our very lives. I think sometimes we miss this incredible, life-changing, heart-renewing, transforming love that Jesus came to show us because we're so busy looking at His love through the lens of this world, of this culture, of this day and age. I'll show you what I mean. I read to you today from the Gospel according to John, chapter 14. And right there in verse 15, Jesus said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." If you love me, you will keep my commandments. Now, if you're a person who has been raised with a kind of twisted love, an unhealthy love, if you've been raised to see love as some sort of manipulative game, you might take the words of Jesus and think that Jesus is manipulative. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. If you really love me, you would keep my commandments. If you love me, you would do this. Well, if you love me, you would do that. Manipulative love. I had a friend who, when she was a teenager, was growing up in a household where there was that kind of love present. Her mother suffered greatly from depression, and she often, out of her own anguish, out of her own pain, manipulated her daughter, my friend. She would say things like, "If you love me, you'd get on your bike and ride down to the store and get me some smokes." When she got a little older, my friend, her mother would say, "Well, if you love me, you and your friends would drive down to the liquor store and get me a bottle." When my friend was just in middle school, her mother used to say things like, "If you love me, maybe you wouldn't go to school today because I just might not be here when you got home." It took my friend a long time to start understanding that Jesus' love, God's love, was not manipulative. When Jesus said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments," He wasn't being manipulative in that way. Others may hear that teaching of Jesus and think Jesus has a very demanding kind of love. "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." You're going on the family vacation this summer and you will have a good time. We are going to Aunt Martha's for Sunday dinner, and you will go with a smile on your face. That's demanding love. But Jesus' love wasn't demanding either. No, Jesus' love wasn't manipulative, it wasn't demanding, and whatever love we may have experienced in our own lives, sometimes it shapes our version of love, or it distorts our way of understanding Jesus' true love, His pure love. Way back in college days, undergraduate years, my philosophy professor called that a hermeneutic of understanding. The experiences we've had in this world shape the way we see the world. A dog that walks on the water is a lousy dog because it can't swim. A Savior who says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments, may appear to be manipulative or demanding. But Jesus is none of those things, is He? No, Jesus is introducing us in this world to something the world had rarely seen before, something called agape love. Agape love is a selfless love, not a selfish love. Agape love is the kind of love that's willing to lay its own life down to lift up others. Christ died that we might be raised with Him. Agape love is the kind of love that will stand at the bottom of a heap to be in solidarity with the least among us, that we might help empower them and lift them up. That's agape love. Agape love has no strings attached. It's not conditional. You can't earn it. You can't buy it. You don't necessarily deserve it or not deserve it. It just is freely given, and it needs to be freely received. How many times have I been asked as a pastor, Dr. Mark, when were you saved? And by now you all ought to know that there's really only one answer to that question. I wasn't saved at Christian night at the baseball game. I wasn't saved when my life was so broken I went to my knees in prayer because I had no place else to go. No, the only answer to that question, when was I saved, is this. I was saved 2,000 years ago when Jesus Christ died for my sins. When Jesus laid His life down to lift me up. It had nothing to do with me and everything to do with Him. That's agape love. I can't earn it. I can't reason my way to it through logic. It just is freely given. And the only thing it asks of us is that we might live our lives as a free response to that gift. To take God's agape love in Jesus, receive it like a gift, unwrap the package, open it up, enjoy the gift, allow the gift to become a part of our lives. No, agape love doesn't have strings attached. It's not conditional, but it does ask us to live our lives anew, to live in a new way, to live in freedom and peace, and to share that love with others, because that's how we've been loved. I remember as a kid, maybe you played this game too. We called it King of the Castle. And the game went like this. You found a high spot in the neighborhood. Maybe it was a mound of dirt, a big old hill. Maybe it was down the basement on top of Mom's washer or dryer. And the whole point was to scratch and claw and push your friends and your brothers down and try to get to the top. And when you got to the top of the hill or the top of the washer and dryer, you got to sing a victory song. I'm the king of the castle, you're the dirty rascal. Until, boom, someone came along and knocked you off the top of the heap, the top of the mountain. And then everybody had to scratch and claw and try and find their way back up again. Jesus took that king of the castle mentality at work in our world and turned it completely upside down. He said agape love is when someone stands at the bottom with the least among us and is in solidarity with those who struggle, those who have heartache. And it works with them to lift them up so that we might rise together. Such is Christ's agape love. Jesus said agape love is the new commandment. It's the new mandate our new marching orders, so to speak, or it's the central vision, the driving force behind the new movement called Christianity. It's our guiding principle, the mandate to love others. In fact, it was the night before Jesus was arrested and tried and crucified. He was celebrating the Passover meal with his disciples, breaking bread, lifting a cup. And you remember he said to them, I give you a new commandment. Actually, the word is mandate. I give you a new guiding principle that will encapsulate those 613 laws of Moses, that will encapsulate all other laws. It's now the mandate, and the mandate is this: love one another as I have loved you. That's why we call that celebration Maundy Thursday, the night before Good Friday. Maundy Thursday comes from a Latin word, mandatum. Mandatum means mandate, because we remember it was that night, the night before he was crucified, that Jesus gave us, his followers, a new mandate, agape love, love one another as I have loved you. If you're wondering how he loved us, all you need to do is look at the cross. He loved us by laying his life down for us. When were you saved? When was I saved? 2,000 years ago, when Jesus laid it all down for us. All he asks us to do is live our lives in a faithful response, to love others as he loved us. Now that sounds really simple, doesn't it? And in some ways, it is kind of simple. The hard part is doing it, isn't it? The challenge is continuing to love others even when it's not easy to love others. I'll let you in on a little secret, though. Where we get hung up, particularly here in North America, is by the way we understand love, or the way we think of love, the lens of love by which we look at love in our own lives, our hermeneutic of experience. We tend to think of love as something we feel, not something we do. We think of love as a noun, not a verb. We think of it as an emotion or a feeling and not an action. But let me tell you, for Jesus, you got to think of agape love as a doing and not a feeling. I think that's why we have so many struggles in our relationships, because we tend to judge our relationships based on how we're feeling at any given moment. Right now, I don't feel love, so therefore this relationship must not be working. I can't tell you how many couples who've come to see their pastor, my life in the last 30 years, and told me, Pastor, I'm in trouble. I don't think I love my husband anymore. Pastor, I'm in trouble. I don't think I love my wife anymore. I'm not in love with her anymore. I'm not sure I ever loved that person. And when we talk about what they meant by love, they describe feelings. I just don't feel it in my heart. I don't feel the way I did the day we got married. Well, you and I both know feelings come and go like a flock of crows landing in a tree and then leaving again. We can't base how our relationships will proceed based on how we're feeling at any given moment. We fall in and out of love all the time, and then we fall out and back into love all the time. That's why couples can be married for as many years as they are. It's because they know love isn't just something they feel, it's something they do. It's loving not just when times are good, it's loving even when they're challenging. It's loving even when you're sheltered in place and you're spending time with each other day in and day out, and it's practicing all those good things that the Apostle Paul wrote to us in his first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13. We practice our patience. We practice our kindness. We practice our understanding. It's not just what we feel. It's what we do. That's what love is. It's why parents continue to love their kids even when their kids seem to be breaking apart or troubling the parents or wearing them down. It's why parents love their kids when they're struggling with emotional and psychological difficulties. It's why they love their kids when their kids are going off the rails. It's why they love their kids through thick and thin. They may not feel it at any given time, but agape love continues to love no matter what. It's not just what we feel, it's what we do. And in some ways, it's how we're able to be a church. Agape love is how we have been a church for 2,000 years and continue to be Christ's church. How's that for a long-standing relationship? 2,000 years we have been the good people of God, and we will continue to do that. Even though there'll be times we don't feel it, even though there may be times we may hurt one another, whether we meant to or not, but agape love isn't just how we feel, it's what we do. It's practicing forgiveness. It's practicing patience and kindness, not only in our intimate relationships, but in our congregational life too. It's what we do, agape love. It's not just how we feel. It's the way we live. Now, I know there are times we may feel like we're not doing a very good job. I'm not feeling the love. It's been a long time since I've felt it. Or I made this mistake, or I made that mistake, or I was a lousy parent here, or a lousy parent there. I've been a lousy husband, or a lousy wife, or a spouse, But agape love is also quite forgiving, isn't it? Agape love means that we learn to forgive ourselves, learn to forgive one another. Most importantly, we learn how to receive God's forgiveness so that we can continue loving even when we felt guilt, or we felt broken, or we felt shame. Agape love allows us to move forward. Friends, I want to encourage you not to be overly concerned about having a perfect love. Jesus never asked us to be perfect people, just faithful people. And faithful people stick together with one another through thick and thin. They forgive each other when things fall apart, and they open themselves to the restorative power of God's grace and mercy, even when they can't keep things going forward. No, it's about continuing to sing God's praises and to rejoice in God's mercy and grace and love no matter what. It's to ring the bells. Ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack inside of everything. Don't you know? That's how the light gets in. Friends, in all our loving, in our doing, our agape love, even when we break ourselves against one another and against God, I want you to remember that God's light is still shining in you and through you. That's the promise that Jesus made. Right after he said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments," he said, "I am sending you another, an advocate, a Spirit that will strengthen you. Spirit that will fill our hearts, our minds, our activity, our doing with light, the light of God's grace and mercy and love." Praise be to God. Amen.